Becoming my own boss has been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done, but it's also been full of lessons I never saw coming. Some were exciting, others were tough, and some have completely changed the way I see entrepreneurship. So today I'm spilling the tea on the hardest and most eye-opening truths I've learned in my first 5 months. So if you ever wondered what it's really like to run your own business, keep watching because this is the stuff most people don't talk about. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's already been 5 months since I sat down and was serious about starting my business. Hi, if you don't know me, my name is Emma and welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Clay, a little series where we sip on some, coffee, sculpt using polymer clay and talk about the real raw sides of being a human, an artist, a small business owner. And as I hit this 5-month mark, it's caused me to reflect a lot about my journey and what I've learned so far. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about the 5 hard truths I've learned in 5 months of being an entrepreneur. So let's get started. So a quick little timeline. It was early October that I sat down and I was like, we're starting this shop. And I started planning it out. I started meeting with a business counselor, figuring out how to set up an LLC. And then I officially launched my shop, like it was open for sales mid-November. So it's technically been 4 months of my shop being open, but I started everything 5 months ago. But a crucial part of this video is also sculpting. So before we talk about the 5 hard truths, let's chat about what the project is for today. So if you're watching my previous videos, then you know I'm currently in my prototyping phase, preparing for my March shop drop, which is coming so soon. And throughout all of my prototyping, I made this bag charm. It's breakfast with Florence. She has her avocado toast and egg on her head and a cup of coffee. And then in my last coffee and clay episode, I sculpted this trinket dish to go alongside with it. So currently we have these two. And I really want to roll with this breakfast pastel theme for the launch. And so what we're going to do today is that before I even ever made this, I made this prototype last month. But we are going to, in this episode, breakfastify her. That's not a real word, but that's okay. So what that means is we're going to replace the strawberry on her head with a croissant. And then similar to this cup of coffee, we're going to add a little cup of matcha because as much as I like coffee, I also love my tea. So let's make the second iteration of this bag charm. So number 1, learning as you go is a non-negotiable. If I had $1 for every single time I said the phrase, I don't know how to do that, but I trust that I can figure it out, I would be a millionaire by now. And being a solopreneur is that you are doing everything. And not to say there's not supports out there and resources and people to help, but at the end of the day, like, you are every single role of the company and you have to learn how to do that, which is a lot. The mental load of starting a business, way heavier than I thought it would be. But don't let that scare you. It is possible, and I have learned so much throughout the months. If you've never had a company before, the learning curve is pretty steep, and everything takes longer than expected. But you will learn a lot. People often think that starting an art business means that you'll spend all day creating, just making art 24/7. But the truth, most of the time, I am not making art. I'm answering emails, managing orders, doing marketing, troubleshooting, learning tons and tons of new skills on the fly. While 1 minute I am a designer and an artist, the next and most of my minutes, I'm an accountant, a social media manager, a website builder, a customer service rep, and on and on. It's like constantly switching hats, and the weight of it all and the executive functioning demands of it is honestly really heavy. This is my little pattern for when I make sweaters. 2 of these halves make a whole sweater on the body. It just saves a lot of time doing this. It took me a few tries to figure out the right size, but we got it now. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful that my work revolves around creativity, But the business side, it does demand much more of me than I could have expected going into this. And no one hands you a guidebook, you just figure it out as you go. And you learn by making mistakes and adapting and just going forward day after day. I won't lie, it can be very overwhelming and also quite exhausting. And while this might kind of seem like a downfall, honestly, I wouldn't change it for the world because it's only built self-trust in myself and shown me that I can do hard things. And it's helped me remove some of my limiting self-beliefs that I used to have about myself and my capabilities. And while it can seem terrifying to learn as you go, ultimately, I do see this as being a big pro and something that has really benefited me as a person. I've learned to be okay with not having all the answers, just to trust that I'll figure it out. And weirdly, it's kind of made me a better artist too, because throughout all of this, I've learned the importance of experimenting and trial and error. And honestly, there's no better way to learn than just by doing it, which is scary, especially if you're a beginner, because often we make more mistakes when we're new at something. We don't know what we're doing, but we figure it out. It's also taught me that when you run a business, you don't have time to wait until you're quote unquote ready. You just have to start, you have to learn, and then keep going. And somehow over time, it just happens. You can become the person that takes what you thought was impossible and make it possible, as cheesy as that might sound. So now the base of the sweater is all done, so it is time to add the little strawberries. Initially, I just used to use the red to make my strawberries, but I found if you add in a little bit of this pink and a little bit of translucent clay, then it just makes it softer and cozier and warmer. So we're gonna do that. But number 2, the second lesson I've learned is that risk and uncertainty are inevitable. It's just part of the deal if you're gonna start a company. One of the biggest lessons I've learned from doing hours of entrepreneurial training and meeting with a business counselor is that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you just have to be okay with risk. Nothing is guaranteed. There's no perfect roadmap for us to follow. And you've guessed it, along with that comes a lot of uncertainty. But it's not about just taking any risk. It's about taking calculated risks. We want to be smart about it, but let's get a bit more honest and personal here. So I never saw myself as a risk taker growing up. I am in fact the complete opposite of an adrenaline junkie. You will never, ever find me on a roller coaster or doing anything remotely, quote, thrilling, because I am way too sensitive for that. But when it comes to taking risks that'll bring me closer to a life that feels authentic, risks that push me towards something I actually want and care about, I will always take them, every time, because I refuse to let social conditioning or unspoken rules keep me from living the life that I dream of. Since I'm always challenging myself though, I haven't felt this youthful in a long time, like maybe since my early 20s, I haven't felt this youthful. And also, time moves both simultaneously very slow but very fast. But you know how when you're younger, when you're a kid, time seems to slow down because as we experience new things, time moves differently. And I'm getting to experience that feeling again, which is really nice, honestly. And science actually backs this up. Our perception of time literally slows down when we do new things. That's why childhood summers felt endless, but adulthood can often feel like it's flying by. Or you know how you go on a vacation or travel to a new place and time moves differently? Yeah, it's kind of like that. But when we fall into routines, our brains go on autopilot, and this makes time feel compressed. But if we can start living a life where we're learning more, exploring, and stepping outside of our comfort zones on a regular basis, then it causes our brain to process more information. And when we have to process more information, it literally makes time feel slower, makes life feel richer and fuller. And running my business has forced me into this state almost constantly, for better or for worse. It's keeping my mind sharp, my day is interesting, sometimes a little too overwhelming, a little too interesting, but it does make life feel much more expansive. I never feel like I'm coasting through the years anymore, but I'm actually like living. And honestly, this is the kind of youth I'd rather hold on to than live a monotonous life. So we have a good amount of her done so far. And if you're wondering why I use this is just an old supplement bottle, or sometimes you'll see me sculpt on top of this lid. And just to take care of my hands, it's much easier to hold on to this than to like always be holding on to a little bit. I wanna make sure I'm taking care of my hands as much as I can so that I can keep creating as much art for as long as possible. Speaking of creating art, let's go on to number 3. Quality over quantity will always win in the end. So don't feel like you need to burn yourself out and rush to produce so much all the time. Sometimes doing less is actually better. But I'll explain more as we make the croissant for her head accessory. So to make our croissant, we're gonna use this color. It's called Ecru, and it's really good if you ever wanna make any kind of like bakery pastry thing. I also love mixing this with other colors to kind of tone them down and get more like an earthy, soft feel. So let's use social media real quick as an example of this. So back when I was actually posting on social media, trying to do it at least every single day, I actually didn't notice any growth. And I think that's because while I was producing a lot of content, and not that it was bad quality, but it just wasn't as high of quality, it wasn't thought out because I was thinking about just producing and trying to do that. And I realized after a month or two of posting content every single day, and it really just wasn't helping me. But because I'm a business in the early stages, I also do want to, grow, and I do want to produce obviously items that are high quality, but also content that's high quality so that it's interesting and provides value. And when I then took a step back and I said, 1, posting every single day honestly is not helping me. 2, it's kind of burning me out. And 3, if I don't need to post every day, why would I? So I simply stopped trying to post every day or nearly every day. And I went down to maybe posting just 3 to 5 times a week. It honestly depends on the week. But the quality of the content, because I was taking more time to produce it, honestly helped more. Plus, when I was posting more, I found that my own content was competing with itself. Like, for example, if I post, say, something today and I post something again tomorrow, then whenever I post tomorrow would kind of make whatever I post today irrelevant then. Versus if I post something and let it do its thing for a couple days, then that one post just keeps growing and it ends up being the same at the end of the day. Of course, I am not, a star social media manager. I would not take my advice over someone that's actually worked professionally in marketing. I'm still learning how to do this, but I have found that it's much better to focus on higher quality over quantity. And I think the same goes for making items too. Okay, our little tiny croissant is made. Now we need to add some color so it looks nice and crispy and brown. So to do that, we're gonna use some chalk pastels. It's much better to have a smaller catalog, a smaller inventory, but have things that are really high quality, really interesting, really creative. Plus, you also don't want to give your customers choice paralysis. That was honestly pretty quick. Here's the final croissant. She's nice and crispy and textured, and honestly, I'm hungry now. I wish I had a little croissant to eat, but let's pop her on the head. I'm thinking maybe a little sideways. What do we think about that? I don't know. What do we think? Is that kind of weird? Being completely honest, I don't know how I feel about the croissant on the head. I'm not sure. I feel like maybe I just need to make it smaller, or maybe it's just too close to the color of her skin. Although honestly, the colors of the clay do change a little after baking, and so I'm gonna roll with it. It's a prototype anyways, so we can always change it, and we'll see what the final product looks like. But what do you think? I can't decide yet. We'll keep going. It's all part of the creative process. We just gotta try things out and then we'll adapt as needed. Now, number 4, I believe. This is kind of going off the last one a little bit, but growth is both simultaneously very slow sometimes, but also very fast. Sometimes one week will feel like a wild roller coaster and so many things happen and there's so much progress and you feel overwhelmed. You're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot and I'm very grateful, but like, this is a lot. And then there's other weeks where honestly, it feels so slow. And in your brain, you're like, do I even have a business? What am I doing? Like, you're still working, you're still doing things, but it's like, you just don't see the same growth, I guess, like externally, which let's talk a bit more about that, the external versus like internal growth of starting a company. One of the hardest parts of starting a business is realizing that internal growth and external growth don't always happen at the same pace. In the beginning, there's so much work that happens behind the scenes, building systems, refining the brand, learning new skills, setting up the foundation for something that's actually sustainable in the long run. It's constant, it's exhausting. There's a lot happening, and yet from the outside, it might look to others like nothing is happening. Especially in the beginning, sales can be slow, engagement can feel inconsistent. There are sometimes long, frustrating lulls where it feels like all the effort you're doing internally, behind the scenes, isn't translating into external results. But don't let that discourage you because that's also just how it works with any new project you're starting. The groundwork, the foundation, always comes first. But I have to remind myself of that constantly, that just because there's not immediate visible external results doesn't mean it's not working, doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's just part of the process that every business goes through. Patience, patience, patience is so important. Okay. I think I might actually like the croissant in the head. I feel like I'm liking it better now that it's all put together, but no morning is complete without a beverage of some sort, and at least for me, some caffeine in that beverage. And so we're gonna do a little matcha latte because I think the colors will look really cute with this. Plus, I know for me, my favorite kind of matcha latte is a strawberry matcha latte, and so seeing strawberries on the sweater, I'm like, it has to be a matcha, it can't be a coffee. So we're gonna do that. And while we make the mug, we're gonna chat about number 5. And this is not to scare you off, but again, it's just being honest. Being an entrepreneur is a big investment of time and energy and money, and especially at the beginning, a lot of that without a ton back. There's a big chunk at the beginning where you're investing. But like I said, don't let that scare you off, but it's a fact. I'm not quite sure what color to make the mug. I initially thought about doing some ecru mixed with a light pink. Ooh, maybe we're gonna try out doing some ecru with this pink to see if we can get kind of like an earthier, more subdued pink, but it'll still be very complementary with the sweater. As we know, starting a creative business, especially at the beginning, is a huge commitment of time, money, and energy. I don't have a ton of funds to hire anyone to help me, so I am doing everything entirely by myself. It turned out this really pink, kind of almost salmon color, I guess, which I think will look really nice next to it. And again, remember, all these colors will be slightly different after baking. But we've already talked about how intensive the logistics of running a business can be, so let's talk about something that's sometimes juicy but also kind of boring, which is finances. While every business will have different startup costs, it's definitely one of the first things to consider before diving in and starting a company. Now, since I run a handmade business where I make orders as they come in, I don't have to worry about renting a storefront. I'm not hiring employees or managing large-scale manufacturing. At the moment, I'm actually not manufacturing anything. It's all handmade. My business is definitely on the lower risk end financially. It's a lot more affordable. Not to say that I didn't invest, a good handful of $1,000s into it, but I didn't need to take out loans. I was able to fully self-fund everything. But regardless what startup costs are, there will always be unexpected expenses that pop up. And that's the part no one really warned you about. But if you prepare to be unexpected, to know things will come up, then when it does happen, it won't hit you quite as hard. This mug got so dusty. A little sneak peek into the behind the scenes stuff is that I always get so much more dust on stuff. Also, if I'm holding this like this, I always get so much more dust on my items when I'm filming, obviously, because I'm moving my camera around a lot. So, you know, it's fine. I don't know where I was going with that. Just letting you in on some behind the scenes filming struggles. I end up doing a lot of this you actually don't see. I end up cleaning a lot of it because dust just gets everywhere when you're moving things around. That's good enough though. This is just a prototype. Okay, now let's make the matcha. And to do that, we're going to mix liquid Sculpting with some chalk pastel shavings. Let's do that together. So one thing I've yet to perfect is the exact color of the matcha. Previously, I made some using white liquid Sculpting and pastels, but it ended up looking like this, and it's not quite dark enough, and it's also like too creamy. And so I'm actually gonna try adding in some clear, translucent liquid Sculpting. This is what it looks like beforehand. It comes in a little bottle. And I'm hoping this will kind of like water down the creaminess of the matcha. And then we're also going to play around with the color. So let's do a little science experiment. Okay, let's mix her up and see what it looks like. Last time I was definitely missing more of like that earthy green tone, so I'm hoping the second color that you just saw me add in will help tone it down. Oh yeah, this is looking much more matcha-y already. And just like that, we have finished. I actually have the oven already preheated, so I'm gonna go stick these in there, and then we'll wrap up when they're done in about 45 minutes. That way I can show you the final colors that they are after they bake, because it will slightly change. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. All right, they just came out of the oven. Let me get a little closer. The color between her body and the croissant is now a little more different. Still similar, but it's, you know, not as similar as before. And I feel like the matcha color turned out pretty well, actually. It's definitely a bit darker. It's a bit earthier. I know they look crazy with these. I eventually will cut this wire and make it into a little eye pin so that it can go on the keychain. I don't think this is gonna be the final product. I'm not so sold on the color of the mug, and I think I like the croissant. I'm still trying to decide. Just another iteration. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. But speaking of prototyping, in the next video, I'm gonna take you through the rest of my prototyping process, all the way up to actually launching it on my website. We're gonna finish prototyping together. I'm gonna give you some inside glimpses into my brain and my process of designing and determining what to include in my shop drop. And then we'll create everything together, do all the product photos, list everything on my website and on my Etsy, and get it all ready to launch. So hopefully that sounds interesting to you and you wanna come along with me. It's gonna be a little more casual vlog-like style because I'm gonna be kind of taking you through a couple weeks in my life of getting all of that set up. So I hope to see you in that video. And as always, thank you so much for being here and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you happen to like it, it would really help me if you gave the video a little like, maybe leave a comment if you feel so inclined. And if you want more videos like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you're notified when I post more of them. I hope you have a really great rest of your day. Do something creative, do something good for yourself, and I'll see ya in the next video. Bye, friends.